Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm going to just dive right in, inshallah ta'ala. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen. Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light, he's not a spirit, he has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble and unrivaled Master, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And as always, I ask Allah to grant myself and to all of you sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in this book here, the 7 Hadeeth, obligatory knowledge that every Muslim must know. We're on page 13 in the book, and we're going to begin section 3F, which deals with removing najasa. Okay, alhamdulillah, we're still in the process of talking about the conditions of salat, and one of the 8 conditions of salat is that you have purification, and there's so much to talk about for purification. We've just been talking about that for several weeks now. And we've talked about the conditions of purification. We've talked about minor hadith. We've talked about major hadith. We've talked about what to do if you can't make wudu or ghusl, which is tayammum. We've talked about things that are forbidden for a person while they have minor hadith or the various types of major hadith. And all of that talk about hadith is now over. Now we're going to talk about the other thing that you need to be clear from in salat, which is unexcused najas. Okay, for your salat to be valid, you must be clear of hadith, whether it's minor or major, and you must be clear of najas, as long as it's not excused. So let's go straight to the book. It says, section 3F, removing najasa. One of the conditions of salat is that one's body, clothes, place of prayer, and whatever one is carrying is clear of unexcused najas. All right, I'm going to go through that sentence little bit by little bit, inshallah, to make sure it's clear. It says, one of the conditions of salat, because salat has many conditions. I already mentioned there's 8. So one of the conditions is that you have purification. And among the things that entails, it says, is that one's body. Now, when we say your body, we're talking about the outside of your body. Okay, najasa that you have on the inside of your body will not invalidate your salat. Okay, so the blood that you have going in your veins, that is najas, but it doesn't invalidate the salat. The urine that's in your bladder, the feces that's in your intestine, these things do not invalidate the salat because they're on the inside of your body. The place where you need to have the najasa clear from is the outside of your body. However, know that for these purposes, for the purpose of purification for salat, know that your mouth, the inside part of your mouth, and the inside part of your nose, it's treated as if it's the outside of your body. Okay, remember in ghusl, we said you don't have to wash the inside of your mouth or the inside of your nose, and that's true for ghusl. But for salat, your mouth and your nose must also be clear of unexcused najasa. It says, so it's a condition that one's body, this is one thing, one place that has to be clear of najas is your body. Talking about the outside of your body, but also the inside of your nose and mouth. Your body must be clear of najas. Your clothes must be clear of najas. Okay? That means whatever you're wearing at the time that you're making salat, those clothes must be clear of najis, meaning there's no najis on them and they're not contaminated by najis. What's the third thing that must be clear? It says the place of prayer. Okay, when we make salat, ordinarily we make salat on the ground, like we're standing on, either natural ground like earth or dirt, or we're standing on some kind of man-made ground like a sidewalk or a street or a floor in a building or a patio or balcony or something like that. Whatever surface you're standing on when you make your salat, you have to make sure that none of the places that your body touches or that your clothing touches have najasa on it. Okay, you have to make sure that your body and your clothes do not come into contact with any najasa that might be on the surface you're praying on. So what do we say? Your body, your clothes, and the place of prayer, meaning the surface you're praying on. But then there's a fourth thing that also must be clear of najis, and that is whatever you're carrying. So if you're carrying something, that also must be clear of najis, even if it's not actually touching your body or your clothes. All right. For example, let's say that someone uh, urinated into a bottle, okay, and then they put the top on the bottle and they put the bottle in their pocket. Okay, that urine is on the inside of the bottle. It's not actually touching your body. It's not actually touching your clothes. It's only touching the inside of the bottle. But simply because you're carrying that bottle, because it's in your pocket, it will invalidate your salat. So you must be clear of najis in your body, your clothes, the place where you're praying, and also the stuff that you're carrying. Okay, and it needs to be clear of what? It says is clear of unexcused najis. Okay, so we're going to get at the end of this section, inshallah, the full list of everything that's najis. Some of you maybe are wondering, well, what's najis? What's not najis? You've gathered that urine is najis, blood is najis, feces is najis, because I've mentioned them so far in the lesson. But you'll get the entire list of all of the 15 things that are najis according to the Shafi'i school. Some of these 15 things are excused in the salat. Some of these 15 things are excused in the salat, which means there may be some cases where you have najis on your body or on your clothing, and it will not cause your salat to be invalid because sometimes it's excused. An example is like blood from your own wound. So like, I don't know, say you had a bump on your face and you scratched it and then it started bleeding. As long as the blood that comes from that wound is a small amount of blood, and as long as it didn't separate from your body and then come back onto your body later, like as long as it didn't drip from your face and then land on your stomach, uh, as long as something like that didn't happen, then this small amount of blood is excused. It will not invalidate your salat, even though it is najis, and even though it is on the outside of your body, it's excused. Okay, it doesn't invalidate the salat. It says an example of excused najis is blood from one's wound. Okay, so we just talked about that. Now, there's one other thing I want to mention before we go deeper into all of this, and that is when we say that you have to be clear of najis, we don't only mean that you have to be clear of the najis itself. You also have to be clear of anything that was contaminated by najis. Okay, if something was contaminated by najis, it will also invalidate your salat. How do things get contaminated by najis? How does that even happen? Okay, well, it happens when something that's najis, a physical najis thing. We're talking about something that's a solid or a liquid. Okay, something that has mass, something that's solid or liquid. When something that's how do I say this? So najis has what we call bulk. There's a certain mass to it. It's solid or liquid, and it has a certain mass. That's najas. Okay? And if that najas thing comes into contact with something else, then that something else, or at least the part of the something else that came into contact with the najas, that will become contaminated by the najas on the condition that moisture is present. On the condition that moisture is present. So, for example, one of the things that's najas are dogs. Okay, dogs are najas. So what that means is that if a dog is perfectly dry and my pants are perfectly dry, then if the side of that dog brushes up against my pants, then my pants will not be contaminated by the najasa of dogs. Okay, my pants will not be contaminated because my pants are dry and the side of the dog that touched my pants is also dry. Okay, so contamination only occurs if moisture is present. Okay, and the moisture could be on either side. It doesn't matter which one is moist. For example, if my pants had moisture in it, say because it drizzled earlier in the day and the pants are still a tiny bit wet, well then when the dry side of that dog brushed up against my pants would have become contaminated because of the moisture. Or like take a different example. Say my pants were perfectly dry. Okay, say it didn't rain at all. My pants are dry, the dog is dry, everything's dry. But imagine that instead of the side of the dog touching my pants, what if the dog's nose touched my pants? The nose of a dog is usually moist. So if the dog's nose touched my pants, then my pants will be contaminated because there was moisture, except this time it was from the dog's side, not from the side of my pants. Okay. This is how things can be contaminated by najas. Okay. Now, I'll give you another example to give you a different type of case. What if the dog's nose touched my dry pants? That contaminated my pants, right? Okay, now what if when I get home, I take off my pants and that part of the pants that the dog's nose touched, okay, that part of the pants brushes up against, I don't know, the side of the sink and there's some water there. Well, then now the side of that sink has been contaminated by the najasa as well. Okay, so when I say contamination occurs, I don't just mean that the bulk of the najasa has to come into contact with something. Okay, the najasa could be gone, but if something contaminated by najasa comes into contact with something else, that also transfers najasa, that also contaminates. I see a question here. I'll just respond to it now while we're on the subject. Someone asks, so you can't pour urine out of the bottle and then put it back in your pocket, right? And that's correct. You can pour the urine out of the bottle, but the bottle is contaminated by the urine because the urine was moist. And so that bottle is contaminated by najasa. So even if you put the empty bottle in your pocket, it would still invalidate the salat because you're carrying something contaminated by najas. Right? What you should do is either just take the bottle out of your pocket and put it to the side somewhere where you won't touch it and you won't carry it, or you can wash it in the way that we're going to discuss today. Inshallah, we'll discuss how to wash uh, najas, how to clean najas, how to lift the judgment of something being contaminated. All right, let's go into it. It says there are three subsections to removing najasa. So when we talk about removing najasa, there's three things we're going to talk about. Number one is how to remove najasa, the basic rules. How do you do it? Number two is istinja, which is a special case of removing najasa, and there's some special rules that apply when you do istinja that don't apply in other cases. Then the third thing we're going to talk about is just the list of the 15 things that are najasa. So let's go into it, inshallah ta'ala. 3F1, how to remove najasa. It says, oh, okay. So what we're going to start with here is we're going to start with the unusual case of what do you do if you're already in Salat and Najasa comes into contact with you? What do you do? It says, if you are in Salat when dry Najasa falls on you, you may fling it off without invalidating your Salat. The condition, though, is that you fling it off immediately without actually carrying it. Okay, so imagine you're in Salat. Okay, you're in Salat, and imagine you have like, a shawl or something around your shoulders, and you're making Salat, and then suddenly, like some dry Najasa, something that has no moisture in it, falls on you. Okay, imagine, I don't know, some kid threw a dried out piece of dog poop and it hit you on the shoulder while you're making salat. Okay, if this happens, first thing I want to call your attention to is that the najasa is dry. And we're assuming right now that your clothing is also dry. Okay, so that means no najasa, there's no contamination occurs. The najasa did not contaminate your clothes. So all you need to do to ensure that your salat remains valid is you just have to get the najasa off of your clothes. And you need to do it immediately without any delay. Okay? So if it lands on your shoulder, what you can do is just like that. Just move like that to fling it off. Okay? As long as you fling the najasa off immediately, then your salat is still valid. Okay? But here's the catch though. You have to fling it in a way that does not involve carrying it. Because if you carry najasa, that does invalidate your salat. Okay, so for example, if some najasa landed on my sleeve, I can't lift up my sleeve and then try to fling it, because by lifting up the sleeve, I carried the najasa. So that would invalidate my salat before I even had a chance to fling it. Okay, so you have to find a way to get it off your body without carrying it, and the easiest way is to fling, like move your body in such a way to just fling it off. All right, now that's probably not going to happen. Most of us are not going to have dry najasa fall on us while we're in salat, but just so you know, that's the rule. It says if the najasa is wet, meaning moisture is present. I don't mean it has to be liquid. When I say wet, I just mean there's moisture present. If the najasa is wet, then flinging it is not sufficient. Why would that be the case? If the najasa is wet, how come it's not sufficient just to fling it off? It's because the najasa was moist. When the najasa landed on your clothing, since it's moist, what did it do? It contaminated your clothing. So even if you do successfully fling the najasa off, it's not going to save your salat, because now the clothing that you're still wearing is contaminated by the najasa. Okay? So it doesn't save you to fling it off. Even if you flung it off immediately, it will not save you if the najasa was moist. It says if the najasa is wet, then flinging it is not sufficient. However, if you immediately, when I say immediately, I mean without delay. It says, if you immediately cast off the garment, meaning the entire garment that got touched by that najasa, if you immediately cast off the garment that the wet najasa touched, then your salat is still valid. Okay, so again, imagine you have like a shawl or a scarf or something around your shoulders, and imagine it like bird poop falls and lands on this shawl while you're praying. Okay, if you just fling the bird poop off, that's not going to save you because the shawl is contaminated. But if you can just throw the whole shawl off of your body, just throw the whole thing off immediately without delay, then your salat is still valid. Your salat is not invalidated because now you don't have najasa on your body. It's not on your clothes because you're not wearing that shawl anymore. It's not on your body, it's not on your clothes, and you're not going to touch it while you're in salat, and you're not carrying it. So your salat will be fine as long as you do that immediately. It says casting off the garment is also valid for dry najasa. Okay, so even, in the example I gave, it was bird poop, which is moist. But even if it had been, the same example from before, a kid throwing a dry piece of dog poop, you know, if instead of flinging the poop, you cast off your whole scarf, then that would still be a solution. Okay, your salat would not be invalidated. Casting off the garment works for wet and dry najasa. All right, so that's talking about what to do if you get hit with najasa in the salat. Now let's talk about the more common case where you're not in salat and you have najasa that you need to clean. Okay, let's say, for example, the example I usually like to give is like, say you're at a baseball game. Okay, some of you maybe have been to these Major League Baseball stadiums. You sit down, you watch a baseball game. The people a couple seats down from you in your row, they order a beer. And the way it works in these baseball games is the person who orders the beer will pass money down. Everybody in the row is expected to take the money and pass it down to the vendor who's selling the beer. And then he passes the beer to the person who ordered it. Of course, as Muslims, we're not going to assist them to drink alcohol. Drinking alcohol is haram. So we're not going to help them pass money down. When they try to pass money down, we're not going to take the money and pass it for them because that's helping them. We won't do that. And when the beer comes, we're not going to help pass the beer either. Okay, but what that ends up meaning in practice is that now someone from over here is going to reach across the 1, 2, 3, 4, however many Muslims there are. They're going to reach all the way across to try to grab that beer from someone on the other side of your group. And in the process, it's very likely that some of that beer will spill. I mean, these are not cans of beer, they're just cups, open cups of beer. If a drop of beer lands on your clothes, then guess what? You're not going to be able to make salat wearing those clothes. Okay, you're either going to have to remove the najasa from those clothes before you make salat, or you're going to have to remove the clothes altogether before you make salat. Okay, this is an example of getting najasa on your clothes, or maybe instead of landing on your clothes, it lands on your arm. That would be an example of getting it on your body. It needs to be removed before you can make salat. It says to properly clean/remove najas, one must use water. And when we say water, we mean pure and purifying water. Okay, so the water is pure, meaning the water itself that you're using has not been contaminated by najas. Okay, and it's purifying, which means that this water you're using is still called water. Okay, it hasn't been mixed with pure stuff to the point where it's not water anymore. Okay, it is water, and it's not been used. When we say purifying, we mean it's water, but it also has not already been used to lift Hadeeth nor to remove najas. Okay, this is the water that we're talking about, pure and purifying water. To properly clean/remove najas, one must use water. Okay, water. There's no other substance that you can use. All right, don't think that if someone spills wine on your clothes that you can pour vinegar on it or seltzer water or something like that to get that wine out. No. All right, what you need to use is pure and purifying water. You cannot use Pepsi or Sprite or anything like that. To properly clean/remove najas, one must use water until the mass of the najasa is gone, as well as its traces. Taste, smell, and color. So when you want to remove najasa, what you do is you pour. Notice the word I used. I said pour. You pour pure and purifying water onto the place contaminated by the najasa until two things happen. Until the mass of the najasa is gone and the traces of the najasa are gone. The mass of the najasa is the literal solid or liquid thing, which is najas, like the wine or the beer or the urine or the poop or the vomit, okay, or the dog hair, okay, whatever the actual physical, tangible piece of najas is, you pour water until that's gone, okay, but it's not enough just to get the body of the najas to be gone. You also have to get the traces of it to be gone, which are the taste, the color, and the smell. You keep pouring water until the mass of the najasa is gone, the taste of the najasa is gone, the color of the najasa is gone, and the smell of the najasa is gone. At that point, we say this place has been purified. The najasa is removed. At that point, you could pray wearing those clothes. Like, say you were washing a piece of clothes, you could pray wearing those clothes. If you're washing a piece of floor, like a spot on the floor, well, you could touch that spot on the floor in your salat, and your salat would still be good because the najasa has been removed. That place is now purified. That's what we mean. I'm going to say all of this again. You pour water. You do what? You pour water onto the najasa until the mass of the najasa is gone and the color, taste, and smell of the najasa are also gone. Right? That's the rule. Okay? Now, what happens if, case number one, what happens if you've really poured the water? I mean, you've washed it well. You've poured the water. Say you put your shirt underneath the faucet in the sink, so the water's just pouring on it, and you're rubbing and everything. You washed it really well, really, really, really well. The najasa is gone, but you just can't get all of the traces to go. I mean, some of you maybe have had the case where you're wearing a white shirt and a drop of blood gets in the white shirt. Well, it's very hard to get the color of that blood to go away. No matter how much you wash that shirt in the water, you'll find that some of the color of that blood remains in the shirt. What do you do? Well, according to the Shafi'i school, if you have washed that item well, I mean, you've washed it well, and even after washing it well, the color remains. Okay, the body of the najasa is gone, the smell and the taste of the najasa are gone, but the color remains. Then, according to the Shafi'i school, that color is excused. Okay, the place is considered to be purified. If all that remains is the color, the place is considered to be purified. And the same rule applies to the smell. So if you washed it really well and the body of the najasa is gone, and the color of the najasa is gone, and the taste of the najasa is gone, and the only trace that you were unable to remove was smell, then according to the Shafi'i school, this area is considered to be purified. Okay, if you tried to remove the mass and the three traces, but in the end one trace remained, if that one trace that remains was the color, then it's excused. Or if the one trace that remained was the smell, then it's excused. Okay. However, if the only trace that remained was taste, it is not excused. Okay. If you remove the najas and you remove the color of it and the smell of it, but the taste of it is still there, then the ruling of the Shafi'i school is that it has not been purified. Okay, because if the taste is present, this is a sign that part of the mass of the najasa is still there. So you must keep washing until the taste is gone. This is also the case if the color and the smell both remain. So if you wash it really well and you got rid of the mass of the najasa and you got rid of the taste, but the color of it and the smell of it are both still there, then the ruling of the madhab is that this area has not yet been purified and you must keep washing. Okay, this is the basic rule. And I'm going to repeat something I said earlier just because I want to make sure you all hear it from me a lot of times. We're talking about pouring the water onto the affected place. Pouring the water onto the affected place. We're not talking about taking your shirt that has a drop of blood on it and dipping it into the water. No, we're talking about pouring the water onto the place that you're cleaning. All right, that's what we're talking about. All right, where are we? It says, okay, inshallah, that's all understood. It says the requirements, though, depend on the type of najasa. Okay, so even though the basic rule is that you pour water until the mass of the najasa is gone and the traces of the najasa are gone, the number of washes that you have to use and the way that you're going to pour the water can vary depending on the type of najasa. And there are several different types of najasa. In this book, we're only going to talk about two types. There's one type, which I'm just going to call normal najasa, And then there's a type which is heavy najasa. Okay, and we need to understand the difference between heavy najasa and normal najasa. Don't worry about the other types that aren't mentioned in the book. Okay, if you just treat those other types the same way you treat something normal, it'll be fine. Okay, the only reason why I mentioned heavy is because if you follow the normal procedure, it's not enough for the heavy case. So I felt I needed to mention the heavy case. But don't worry about other cases. Normal najasa. How do you clean something with normal najasa? Something that is normal najasa or contaminated by normal najasa? You do it in the way we just talked about. Okay, you wash the place, meaning the water has to flow over it, right? You wash that area with flowing, purifying water, okay, until the mass of the najasa is gone and its three traces are gone. And just like I said before, if the only trace that remains is color, well, that'll be excused. Or if the only trace that remains is smell, then that'll be excused. But taste alone is not excused. And the combination of color and smell also are not excused. These are the basic rules for normal najasa. Make sure, make sure that the water is flowing. Okay, if you're using just a small amount of water, so small that it doesn't flow, then that's not going to be sufficient to lift the najasa. And the second type of najasa is heavy najasa. Heavy najasa. This is like strong najasa. Okay, this is the najasa from a pig or a dog. Okay, from a pig or a dog, or even if the animal is like part pig, um, say it was like the offspring, say a dog and a pig had an offspring, that offspring, which is half dog, half pig, also is heavy najasa. Okay, or say like a sheep and a pig had an offspring, that offspring, which is half pig, half sheep, is also heavy najasa because it's part pig. Okay, if a dog and a cat had an offspring, that offspring would be heavy najasa because it's part dog. Okay, so when we say heavy najasa, we're talking about something where part of it is a pig or a dog. Okay, if you if something is contaminated by heavy najasa, what does it say? It says it must be washed with flowing purifying water until the mass and traces are gone. Okay, so it starts out the same way as normal najasa. You just keep washing, you keep pouring that water on it until the mass is gone and the traces are gone. Okay, you clean it to the point where normal najasa would be considered purified. But then what do? It says then washed an additional 6 times. So after you've poured enough water to remove the mass and the three traces, all of that, even if it took you a lot of washes to do that, all of that is considered to be just one wash. Okay, and you're going to have to wash it 6 more times after that for a total of 7 washes. Okay, heavy najasa can only be removed with 7 washes. Hold up. It says for one of these washes, for one of these 7 washes, soil must be mixed into the water. So it's also the case, not only do you need to wash 7 times to remove the najasa of a pig or a dog, but one of those 7 washes must be done not with pure water, but with a mixture of water and soil. Okay, you need to mix enough soil into the water that the water is no longer clear. Okay, that the water, like visually, like you can visibly tell that this water has soil in it. Okay, one of your 7 washes needs to be with soil, and it doesn't matter which wash. It could be the first one, it could be the last one, it could be the one in the middle. It doesn't matter which of the 7 uses soil, but at least one of the 7 washes must be with soil. Uh, Many of the scholars recommend that the first wash be the one that has the soil in it. Okay, and they have a number of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is that because then the 6 washes that come after it with pure water will not only purify from the heavy najasa, but they will also remove the soil, which might be there from the first wash. All right. Special notes. Special notes. Now that we understand the difference between normal najasa and heavy najasa, and we understand how to clean it, there are some special notes here. Number one, it says if the mass and traces of the najasa are already gone without any washing, it is called hukmiyya. This is called najasa hukmiyya. Okay, you might think that there's no contamination because there's no mass and there's no traces, but it still has the hukum. It's still like in the judgment of the Sharia, that area is still contaminated. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone, urinates on your front steps. Okay, you saw them urinate on the front steps, so you know that your steps are contaminated. You know that your steps are contaminated by najasa. But maybe you choose not to wash it right away. And I don't know, maybe you go on a trip, uh, whatever reason, you don't wash it right away. And then next time you come to your front steps, you realize that there's nothing there. Like the urine has dried up. It's gone now. And the smell of it is gone now. You can't even smell the urine. And the color of it is gone. It didn't leave any color. And the taste of it is gone. Okay? So in this example, you know that your steps are contaminated with najasa. It has the ruling that is contaminated. It has the hukum that is contaminated. But the mass of the najasa is gone and the traces of the najasa are gone. In this case, we call this najasa hukmiyya. Okay, it means there's no evidence of najasa being present, but the ruling of the Sharia, nonetheless, is that that area is contaminated with najasa. What do you do in this case? It says it must be cleaned according to the processes above, which means that area, even though there's no mass of the najasa and there's no traces, you still have to clean it the same way you clean any other normal najasa, which is that you pour water on it, and that water must be pure and purifying water, and that water must flow over the area. Okay? But once that water flows over the area, you will immediately consider it to be purified because the normal rule says to wash the water until the mass and the traces are gone. So as soon as you wash water over it, the mass and traces are gone. So it's purified. It doesn't matter that the mass and traces were already gone before you poured the water. Okay. The question is, after the water flows over it, are the mass and traces gone? If so, then we say it's purified. Okay. What if it wasn't urine? What if it was heavy najas? What if it was heavy najasa? Okay. What if, for example, you had a bowl of water sitting out for the cats in the neighborhood to drink from, and you saw a dog drink from that bowl of water? So now you know that bowl is contaminated with heavy najasa because a dog drank from it. Okay, and let's say you dump out the water from the bowl and leave the bowl empty, and then the bowl dries. Okay, it dries out there, and so it's a case of najasa hukmiyya. You don't see any physical najasa there in the bowl, and the taste, color, and smell are not present. But you know that the ruling is that that bowl has been contaminated with dog filth. What do? You pour water over it 7 times, and at least one of those washings must be with soil. And at that point, the bowl will be considered to be purified. Right, what's the next special note here? The next special note, it says, if you are using a small amount of water, if your book is missing the word of, just add it in here. If you're using a small amount of water, meaning something less than 2 qullas, and we talked earlier in the book about what 2 qullas are, but just quick review, 2 qullas of water is the amount of water that can be held by a cylinder, 1 cubit in diameter and 2.5 cubits high. Or if you choose to use a cube, then it's the amount of water that can be held by a cube, which is 1¼ cubits along all sides. It's been estimated to be about 51 gallons of water. So if the water that you're using to clean this najasa is less than 51 gallons, okay, if it's less than 2 qullas, then you must pour the water onto the najasa in order to purify the area. Because if you take the najasa and pour it into a container of water which is less than 2 qullas, then what happens is the najasa contaminates all of the water. So instead of cleaning the najasa, what you've done is you've dirtied the water. Okay, the water and the container holding the water are now all contaminated by najasa. So you don't achieve your aim, which was to clean the najasa. All you did really is spread the najasa. Okay, this is why I repeated so many times earlier in the episode, in the lesson here, that you want to pour water onto the najasa. Okay, you don't want to put the najasa into the water unless it's a large amount of water. Yes, if you have a whole pond, you know, like wherever you are, or if you're by the ocean or something, then sure, you can go ahead and put your najis clothing into the ocean or into the pond and it's fine. But the sorts of containers we typically use in our daily life are not large enough to hold 2 qullas of water ordinarily. So you want to get in the habit of pouring the water onto the najasa. MashaAllah. All right, I'll pause here and I'll take some questions. Okay, first question I see here is, what about the case of just putting the item of clothing in the washing machine on a rinse cycle? Does this resolve it? Uh, According to the Shafi'i school, okay, so first let me just say I'm not 100% sure exactly what happens in the rinse cycle. But if you get like a certain depth of water in there, like say you get 4 inches deep of water, and the shirt still has najasa on it and it's sitting in that 4 inches of water, then it contaminates all the water. And then it means your machine and the other clothes in the machine also get contaminated. So it doesn't actually purify the garment. And unless there's some way that you can know that the garment is just sitting in a place where the water hits the garment and completely purified it without, like, right away, it would be hard for you to say that this garment is purified. Um, so I do not recommend using the washing machine. However, to make it easy on you and everyone else that's here, uh, the Maliki school doesn't have the same judgment as the Shafi'i school. In the Maliki school, if you take something najis and you stick it into a small amount of water, as long as the color, taste, or smell of the water doesn't change because of the najasa you put in it, then the water doesn't get contaminated. This is the rule in the Maliki school. So according to the Maliki school, then yes, you could throw it in the washing machine, and if it comes out clean on the other end, then it's been purified. Next, I see a question, an Aqidah question. It says, what about the non-Muslims? Are they najas? The answer is no. This ayah in the Quran in Surah At-Tawbah, it does not mean that they are literally najas. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likens them to that which is najas because of their false aqidah. Okay, these kafirs, their belief is wrong. And because of their belief, they have very low status. Okay, very, very low status. And things that are najas also have very low status, right? Do we look at urine and feces as something great that we love and we want to have it all around our house, or do we look at it as something gross to be avoided? We look at it as something gross to be avoided, right? Uh, well, guess what has even lower status than things that are najas? A kafir. That's right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أولئك هم شر البرية. says about kafirs that they are the worst of the whole creation. Okay, there's nothing in the universe that's worse than a kafir. Okay, so Allah likens them to najis, but it does not mean that they're literally najis. Okay, if you touch a Christian, okay, this doesn't mean you're contaminated by najis and now you can't make salat. No, that's not what it means. Next question. It says, if your clothes become contaminated by, let's say, a dog's lick or nose, you change the article of clothing and perform wudu. Is this proper? Um, you can change that article of clothing, yes. You do not need to make wudu. Okay, a dog, the lick of a dog or the nose of a dog or something like that is not one of the four things that causes minor hadith. Okay, in fact, none of these types of najis, if they simply come into contact with your body, cause minor hadith. So you don't need to make a wudu. What you need to do is if it's on your body, you need to wash it off according to the processes we mentioned. And if it's on your clothing, then you can either wash that clothing and purify it before you make salat, or you can take that piece of clothing off and you can make salat while you're not wearing it. Um, Either way, then you won't be wearing something contaminated with najasa while you're praying. It says, if a dog licks your hand or any part of your body, do you need to perform wudu after washing the area a few times? No, if the dog licks you, you just have to remove the najasa, which, as we mentioned, is 7 washings, one of which with soil. Okay, there must be one with soil. Okay, this is something else I want to emphasize. You have to, one of the 7 washes must have soil. Okay, so if you wash it 10,000 times with water, it's still not going to be purified unless one of those washes was water mixed with soil. Next question I see here. What about we walk the streets and dogs as well as men urine on the streets and it dries up, but we walk on it? Well, if it's dry and the bottom of your feet are dry, then it's no problem. The najasa on the ground will not contaminate you unless moisture is present. So that's one. That's one answer, mashallah. Um, Another answer is about uncertainty. So one of the rules in the Shafi'i school is that what you know for certain is not overruled by what you doubt about. So, for example, um, let's say that it was raining one day and the ground was wet, and you saw a dog walk down the sidewalk. Okay, so you know that that sidewalk is contaminated now with dog filth because the dog touched it while it was moist. And say the next day it's all dried up and you're walking outside, or better yet, let's say it's not dried up. Let's say the next day it rained again and there's water on the ground, and you're worried that if you touch the ground, somehow that najasa will contaminate you. Well, unless you know that you stepped on one of the parts of the ground that's been contaminated by a dog, then you should not assume that you did. Okay, as long as it's possible that the places you're stepping are places that were not touched by that dog, then you have no evidence that you've been contaminated. So you're not going to just go ahead and say, "Oh, I'm contaminated now." Okay, you don't know that. Next question. It says, "Do you restart the prayer or resume where you are?" I'm not sure what that question is referring to, but if you're in Salat and you get contaminated with najasa and you weren't able to fling it off in the way we described earlier, then your Salat is invalidated. It means that after you purify your clothes or body of the najasa, it means that you will have to, after that, start the Salat again from the beginning. You'll have to start it over. And that's what I see as far as questions are concerned. Some of you sent me salam, so I'll respond. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Um, I'll stop here, inshallah, without going into istinja, because there's a lot to talk about there, and I also don't want the lesson to be too long. So I'm giving everyone a few moments. Okay. Someone asked, can this soil come from Home Depot or such? I'm not sure about the soil at Home Depot. I'm not sure what exactly it's made out of. But you can just use, you know, just dirt from the ground. Okay, as long as the soil you're using is something that's valid to use in tayammum, then it's valid for the purpose of cleaning dog filth. So that means that the soil needs to be unused, like you didn't use the soil already for tayammum. The soil needs to be pure, like the soil you're using isn't itself contaminated by najasa, and the soil has to be unmixed. Okay, so you don't want to have, like if you have dirt that has lots of unnatural things in it, like gypsum or cement or concrete, uh, then that will affect the ruling of the soil. But you don't need much soil. If in some cases 1 cup of water is enough, and you can just put like a teaspoon, a tablespoon, a tablespoon of soil and mix it up, and it might be enough in some cases, maybe 2 tablespoons. I'm sure you can find anywhere like 2 tablespoons worth of unmixed soil. Okay. Well, since there are no other questions, then I'm going to close out. Let's say La ilaha illallah before we go. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. بارك الله فيكم. I'll see you next week at this time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.